And now for something completely different.
Forget everything you've been told by others before. Get ready for the real deal, the full story. Real talk about money, markets, life. Now, it's The Real Investment Show with Lance Roberts. Presented by RIA Advisors.
And good morning and welcome to The Real Investment Show. Of course, it's Tuesday after a freeze has settled in everywhere around the country. Everybody's having trouble flying around right now. Flights are getting delayed everywhere. You might get a little bit of a reprieve over the next couple of days, but then right back at it. So all you people that were going, Christmas was so warm this year. Well, here's the cold weather. Everybody's like, oh, it's such a temperate winter. Here you go. So be careful what you ask for. So a lot of stuff is happening this week, of course. Oh, by the way, just real quick. So my daughter up at Baylor, her and her friends wanted to go see the Baylor hockey game over the weekend. Outdoors? No, it was indoors. It was indoor. It was in Dallas. So they're in Baylor, so Waco, and the hockey game for the Baylor team was in Dallas. So they get in the car all together. They road trip it, hour and a half up to Dallas. Get to Dallas, go to the arena, and it is literally like a movie, like one of the zombie movies or like one of those alien movies where aliens have come down and just zapped everybody out. There was like nobody in the whole arena. The doors are open, the lights are on, all the TV monitors are on, right, for the game. And literally nobody in the entire arena, no security guards, so they're like standing in the ice rink taking Instagrams of themselves, standing on the ice. So, but they canceled the game because of the weather. They didn't get the memo. So, speaking of that, they also went to a party over the weekend where, have you seen these new parties where they all put on headphones and the headphones have music? And there's okay, you haven't seen this. So it's a dance party, right?
Our girls have, but not me.
Right. Okay, so it's a dance party. I've never seen this before, right? So it's a dance party. So you put these headphones on, and you have 3 channels to choose from. So there's different songs playing in the headphones, right? And so basically you dance to your own song that's going on. Well, so she takes video of this room. Now, mind you, there's like 40 people in this room, 40 girls. It's an all-girls party. Right? So they've all got headphones on. They're all singing their songs, right? They're all different songs. Yeah. And they can't hear themselves. So she takes video of this, and literally it's like a choir from a deaf school.
Oh my gosh.
Nobody's singing on key. Nobody's on key.
A choir from a deaf school?
Right, because
my gosh.
there's like nobody's on key. Everybody's singing different words, but they're all dancing, so they're all having a great time. So
like that scene in Charlie Brown.
I've never seen it. Was the funniest thing I've ever seen, and I'm like, this is just, I don't understand kids. That's all there is to it. If you're just gonna dance to your own song, stay home. I mean, you're not talking to anybody, so what's the purpose of the party? Anyway, sorry, that's my weekend. Anyway, all right, coming up this week, we got lots of stuff going on. We got the Fed meeting this week. Will they cut rates? That's going to be the big question. Will they, won't they? And right now it looks like that the Fed will probably stay pat. We'll see what happens. The expectations are they'll cut rates. I would not be surprised if they just hold pat this meeting. So again, that's going to have some influence on the market later this week, but it really won't be the rate cut itself. It's really going to be more of what Jerome Powell says following the announcement of whatever we get. So that press conference about future outlooks for rate cuts is going to be the most important thing probably this week. But also we have earnings this week, and we'll go through some of the charts this morning, but we have earnings this week from 4 of the Mag 7, Apple, Meta, Amazon, and Tesla this week. And then we're going to get some more next week. And then NVIDIA doesn't report until the end of February, so we got to stretch to get there. But over this week and next week is just a whole deluge of earnings that are coming in. But we're going to start getting some of the mega cap earnings this week, and we'll kind of go through those charts this morning. There may be some opportunity there as well. Outside of that, though, economic data is continuing to come in better than expected. That's also giving a little bit of support potentially to the markets here, and particularly in kind of some of the more economically sensitive areas. You know, we've seen a good run now in basic materials, industrials, those type of stocks, because this economic reflation narrative that is kind of pervading the markets right now continues. However, saying that economic surprises are now extremely elevated, and the way economic surprises work, and this is obvious, is that it's just a function of sentiment, is that the data is coming in better than the average analyst estimate. Well, when that continues to happen, they start ratcheting up their growth estimates, which is happening right now. We've got a lot of expectations coming up for very strong economic growth this year, very strong earnings growth this year. That's going to make it more difficult for these surprises to continue to come in and beat, and then you're going to start getting a reversal in this where we start missing economic data and those estimates are going to start coming down again. So, again, kind of we're in a bit of nirvana in the markets at the moment. There's really not much going wrong. There's not much going on, first of all, and there's not much going on either, and everything just kind of continues to kind of feed on itself right now. There are some risks coming up here over the next couple of months, in particular with economic data. In particular, and then of course, right now, the poly market has about an 80% chance that the government will be in a shutdown by the end of this week, right? So January 31st will be technically be in a shutdown. There's a kind of a fight over DH funding in the actual continuing resolution. Again, we can't pass a budget. We have to keep passing continuing resolutions to fund the government, and right now we're debating over whether or not to fund Department of Homeland Security. So that looks to stalemate out this week. We'll see if we don't get a bill coming in like 11th hour, like Saturday. We get a bill signed to keep the government from shutting down. It'll probably be a short-term bill, something that funds the government through April, get through tax season, and then we'll be right back into this fight again. This is going to be kind of the continued case here probably for a while. But with that, we're going to talk this morning with John Penn about why work sucks. I think we all know why work sucks, but we'll talk about that in more detail this morning. But let's talk a little bit about what you need to know before the bell this morning. Markets have been rallying now for the last 4 days. We're doing well, approaching all-time highs here. So markets been hanging in there pretty well. About to come off that momentum sell signal. So if markets continue to trade better today, this morning we're a bit flattish. We'll see how the day turns out. But we're not overbought yet, and that momentum sell signal is about to turn back onto a buy signal. So that should give some lift. If we can break out to kind of all-time highs here, that should get a little bit of wind kind of beneath the wings, so to speak, of the markets and kind of push. Again, we've just been in this kind of rising trend. We've been unable to really make new highs here, but we keep kind of getting higher bottoms. Keep coming off this 100-day moving average that continues really here to support the markets. As we talked about last week, we had that, last Tuesday, we had that whole kind of market sell-off over the Greenland announcement. Markets took out the 50-day moving average. We said, hey, be careful with that. Don't react to that break immediately. Start selling your portfolio. Give it a day or two. That was good advice. Markets now rally back. We're back above the 20-day, and everything's doing okay. Like I said earlier, we're going to start getting some announcements from some of the big boys today. There may be some opportunities coming in some of these areas. For instance, Apple announces this week. Apple's had a very big sell-off here recently. So the risk with that is with Apple oversold here, any announcements on earnings that are better than expected is likely going to give this stock a bit of a boost. So again, from a trading perspective, again, you can like or hate the mega cap stocks, doesn't matter. But from a trading perspective, this kind of oversold condition is actually a decent setup to buy Apple here for a trade. Options really across the board for all four stocks that we'll talk about here in just a second imply about a 4 to 7% increase from current levels if their announcements are good. Now, again, there's the risk to announcements is that Apple comes out and says, everything's great, we beat on revenues and everything's fantastic, but the rest of this year looks terrible and it's going to sell off even further. So again, you have to understand there is risk in this, but with the decline in price, and this is the same for every stock we'll talk about here in a second, with this decline in price, this oversold condition going into earnings, it won't take as much of an earnings beat to get the stock a little bit of momentum. So again, just from a trading perspective, maybe 3, 4, 5 days, there could be some decent upside. You got a lot of resistance in Apple. As an example, you got the 20, the 50, the 100-day all sitting right above it. So lots of levels of resistance that could cap a rally. But again, the setup technically looks pretty good. Amazon, really, and this is going to be kind of the same story for a lot of these, has really kind of been working just a big sideways consolidation. It's not as oversold as Apple is, but again, in a decent position, sitting above moving averages right now, has worked off some of the overbought condition. Also, kind of a decent setup for an earnings announcement that just slightly beats or is much better than expected. Microsoft is a really good example of the same thing. It's actually been having a nice little rally going in, kind of expectations for earnings. I think traders are starting to kind of buy into this story, but really oversold here, triggering a momentum buy signal and not overbought yet. A lot of resistance here for Microsoft, but again, a better than expected earnings announcement could push the stock up through that pretty quick. We've seen that type of action before where it gets oversold like this, and then you have a very good strong rally out of this. And this has been a decent oversold position here for a while. Lastly, the last one we'll talk on this morning is just Meta. Same exact story as Microsoft here, very oversold, has already been trying to rally here over the last few days, but again, just triggered a momentum buy signal, a little bit overbought here, but again, a good earnings announcements could push the stock up towards 725-ish, somewhere around there. So again, just going into earnings, these recent pullbacks in the mega cap stocks have just kind of generated a tradable bottom. Again, may not be a lasting bottom. I'm not saying, hey, buy these for the next 10 years. But from a tradable perspective, there's some opportunity here. Just kind of something to consider kind of going into earnings this week, because again, this will be a big week for earnings. All right, that's what you need to know before the bell this morning. When we come back, we'll pick up with John Penn, talk about why work sucks. Don't go away.
Investment Advice blog. It's required reading for the informed investor. Catch it today at realinvestmentadvice.com.
And now, another page from the Real Investment Advisors Investing Manifesto. A passive investment portfolio requires active risk management. It's not a choice, it's necessity. Diversification doesn't protect against risk of loss. Let us actively help you reach your financial goals with RIA Advisors. Neither bull nor bear. RIA Advisors, 281-501-1791 or online at realinvestmentadvice.com.
You're listening to The Real Investment Show.
I heard nothing that entire break. I didn't know what was going on.
Should have put our headphones on and just danced.
Exactly.
Listened to some music and just had a dancing party.
Exactly. So, all right. So kind of a couple of things is that I got this very interesting email just talking about, this idea that work, well, like the title of the show says today, is that work sucks, and that this traditional 9 to 5 kind of, slug is, for the birds, right? It's just, I don't know, this 9 to 5 thing of working, 5 days a week, who invented this idea? And I'm like, well, this has been around since the dawn of time, but hey, I get it, right? There's a lot of options out today, which changed dramatically after the pandemic shutdown. This opportunity to work from home, which everybody thought was fantastic at the time, is like, oh, I don't have to actually drive into work. I can just work from the house. I can just put on a dress shirt and have my pajamas on the bottom and get on the Zoom meeting, and this is fantastic. And the problem with that is that we lost a lot of things, right? You not going into, and again, this has been proven. Even J.P. Morgan recently came out and demanded that everybody came back to work because they ran studies that show you lose a lot of productivity when you don't have your employees all working together. You lose the collaboration, you lose the connectivity. You lose the efficiencies of being able to just say, hey, I've got a problem, John, what do you think about this problem? And when you're working kind of in isolation, it's great, it's nice, but, and again, I can tell you from previous history, for a long time when I was first starting one of my first businesses that I started, I was working with partners that lived overseas. I had one that lived in France and one that lived in England. So we were on basically an 8-hour lag between their workday and my workday. So my workday, when they were out working, I was working in the middle of the night, right? But I was working from home. And what happened is that you wake up one day and like you haven't left your house in 5 days. You've just been, because you're just working around the clock. There's pizza boxes stacked up in the kitchen. You're wearing the same shirt you wore 5 days ago, and it's all fine. But it's really not healthy to kind of be locked up into your house all the time. Now that I'm older, I just want to be locked up into my house all the time. I don't really want to leave. But this whole work from home dynamic really changed a lot of things for people. And this idea now that, working a 9-to-5 job is really kind of passé. It's like, why would I want to do that? And look, I get it, right? Getting up and going to work and earning a paycheck, certainly is not great, but, unfortunately we got to pay bills. But it does, there are a lot of new considerations, right? We've created an economy over the last really 20 years of gig jobs. Mm-hmm. So, the gig employment has become a very big thing now where I can work multiple jobs doing gig jobs and I can make income doing that, and that's fine. But again, then you also, with the problem with gig jobs is that you lose the benefit side.
Absolutely.
Right.
Medical insurance.
Medical insurance, health insurance, dental insurance. So, the issue is that you have a lot of choices these days about how you work, where you work. People have opportunities to kind of create the environment that they want. And the real issue is making sure that you choose the correct environment, right? You say, I don't want to drive to work, so I'm going to do this over here. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with running gig jobs until you need health insurance, right? And those type of things. Or you go out and try to buy your own health insurance and you realize what the cost of it is. So, I just think it's interesting. There's, and again, we've got a poll question that's out this morning. It says, what makes a job worth keeping today? And the question is flexibility and autonomy, pay and benefits, purpose and fulfillment, job security. Those are kind of the four choices. I'm not so sure that job security is a thing anymore, but back when I was growing up, my dad worked for Dow Chemical. Yeah. And so, back in the day when our parents went to work for a company, they went to work for a company for 30 years. It was like, I got this job, I'm going to be here for 30 years and I'll retire. I got my pension, I got my gold watch, and that's the way it goes. That's not the world we live in anymore. So, job security really either way is not really a consideration, I think, that I would consider. As much, because companies, they're going to fend for themselves. And so if you go to work for a company and the company gets in trouble, there's an economic downturn, recession, it doesn't matter how good of an employee you are, you're at risk. I'm not saying they're going to terminate you, but you're at risk depending on how serious it gets. But I do think it does, but there is a point that says when you go to work for a company, do your very best, be the best employee you can be with that company, and that will create better job security. Because if you're a really good, indispensable employee, you're willing to go above and beyond the job requirements, you show up early, you stay late if needed, you don't complain, when those layoffs start to come around, they're going to go, you know what? John's a good guy. He's here all the time. He works. I can depend on him. I'm going to keep John now. Mary over here, she's always complaining. She's always late. She misses days all the time. That's an easy termination, right? So if you go to work for a company, don't make yourself an easy target either, right?
Yeah, these are all things that I'm kind of not really wrestling with, but that I'm kind of what we're dealing with at the Penn house right now.
Right.
Because our daughters are 23 and 25. Our youngest daughter just graduated from college this past December. Our oldest daughter will be, our oldest will be 26 this year, so she graduated in 2023, and she's been in her first kind of post-college career job since. And it's just interesting to see how, our girls have had to enter the workforce and now how things are developing for them. And our youngest daughter specifically, our youngest daughter's worked, she's had a job through school, but now she's actually interviewing for her first post-college career. And it's just really interesting to see what's important to her. right? Because so you talk about the 9 to 5.
Right.
Like for me, 9 to 5 sounds like vacation, right? I mean, only 8 hours a day or what that is? I mean, come on. I mean, I remember a couple years ago when our oldest daughter was about to graduate from college and she was interviewing for post-career, for her first job after school. You know, she was at home with us and she was interviewing for employers, and it was around 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, and I was at the office at home working on some emails. And our oldest daughter leans in the office. She's like, "Dad, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm working a little bit." And she says, "No, Dad, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm answering some emails. I'm reaching out and answering some questions that I have from clients." She's like, "It's almost 9 o'clock at night." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I want to get this done so that way tomorrow morning I'm ahead of the game, right? I want to get this all done." And so it's just, but now since she's been in her first college career after school, she works well beyond 9 to 5, right? So it's just really interesting to kind of see the mentality as maybe as like our daughters, it's just our younger generation has, they're looking at going to school or getting that, they're coming out of school, they're looking for that first job after school. What's really important to them, I'm just like, just get your foot in the door, right? With our youngest daughter right now, it's just like, just get your foot in the door, make contacts, because you never know who you might work with later down the road, right? And so I think she's been kind of looking for the perfect job. And I had to tell her, it's like, don't be Cousin Eddie in Christmas Vacation waiting for the perfect management position to come along, right? Just get your foot in the door and be proactive and start meeting people, right?
Well, no, and this, I try to have the same conversation with my kids. They're so, like my daughter, so my youngest daughter, she's, pre-med at Baylor.
Yeah.
And she's just constantly torn. And she's like, "Dad, I just don't know exactly what I want to do with my life." I'm like, "It doesn't matter." She goes, "But I'm in college. I need to make sure I get the right degree so that I can do exactly what I want to do." I was like, it's not going to matter. Because probably what you're going to be doing 20, 30 years from now is going to be entirely different than what you got your degree. And this is just the way that it works.
Yeah.
And again, to kind of your point with your daughter, and I think that's is a great thing, is just make contacts. Look, when I started, when I left college, my whole purpose in college was I wanted to go to work for Coca-Cola. That was my life dream. When I was 18, I wanted to go to work for Coca-Cola. Right? That was it. But things happened. When I was in college, I was traveling all around the world. I used to be on the U.S. martial arts team, and so we traveled all over the world, competing. And I was meeting all these other people that had 9 to 5 jobs, right?
Yeah.
Here I am, 18, 19, 20 years old. I'm traveling all around the world. I'm competing against people that are in their 20s and 30s at the time. And I'm meeting bankers and lawyers and all these other martial arts competitors that had careers, and the martial arts was their hobby, right? For me at that time, that was my business. So it was just a very different setup. But I met all these contacts, and then that's how I got introduced into finance. And from there, things started to change, and I started, raising capital and doing, making investments into businesses, building fitness facilities, all kinds of stuff. And it's just kind of one thing led to another. So, but what I went to school for, finance and accounting, was not what I wound up using that skill set I learned, but in a very different format than what I thought I wanted. And kind of my dream job, I never even got close to. But now I have my dream job, but it was something I never even imagined when I was young.
Yeah.
Right?
So I'm the same way. So when I was coming up through school, so I was very fortunate to have an internship back in the day when I was in college, and I was working for a wood products company. They made lumber, home building materials, Louisiana Pacific. And as an intern there, my junior and senior year in college, I had to edit and rewrite all of the standard operating procedures for the employees in the plant. And the plant ran 24 hours a day, right? And so if you were the crane operator and you were out sick, somebody else had to be able to step in and run that piece of equipment. So they had to be actually able to read and understand all the standard operating procedures that I put in place. And I studied business and had a minor in communications in school. But long story made short, I never, looking back, I never thought I would be in this role and in this profession. But when I was back at Louisiana Pacific, so I was one of the lucky ones. Mm-hmm. So in the plant environment, I had an office. So in the summer, I had AC. And in the winter, I had heat. But every day, I made it a point to put on my hard hat, I had my steel-toed boots, and I went out to the plant floor, spoke with all the men and women working on the line, and I made relationships with them. And after some time, folks started coming up to me saying, Johnny, you went to college, right? Because they made me an offer and I went full-time after school.
Right.
And I said, yeah, I went to school, went to college, and so they started saying, well, do you understand what a 401k is? Do you know what mutual funds are? We don't understand what any of this means. And I said, well, sure, I'd be happy to talk with you about this.
This was 1957. by the way.
Right, so this was back when stone tablets were around, right? But long story made short, I started developing relationships with folks, and I said, you have an HR or benefits person upstairs that can answer all these questions for you. And they said, well, they never come down here and talk with us like you do. And so I developed some trust. And then long story made short, through some connections that we had with our family, I struck up a conversation with a regional manager at Charles Schwab, and I told him the conversations that I was having with folks out on the plant floor at Louisiana Pacific, and they said, you know what, we're looking for folks like you, and that's how I got entered into finance, and just got my foot in the door. I had no idea where it was going to go, but some of the folks that I work with today here at this firm, I met 26, 27 years ago. Yeah. So you just never know how it's all going to come together. Yeah. So I think sometimes if you can just be proactive, get your foot in the door, and just, serve others. And I think it can pay off in the long run too, right?
And I think that's a really great story, because they're the same way with me, right? Yeah. I've worked for other companies. And when my kids were growing up, I made them all go get jobs, right?
Yes.
So when they turned 16, it was like, you have to go get a job. And the whole purpose of that is to teach them what jobs they don't want to do, right? Because when you're 16, 17, 18, you're going to get, the only job you're going to get is lifeguarding, which you're outside all day, just cleaning pools, or you're going to be fast food, right, of some sort. And the purpose of that was, my son did construction. That's another good job. But you very quickly learn what you don't want to do for a career, right? But it was important for them, and I think this is I see this a lot more these days, John, where parents kind of shield their kids from that environment. It's like, I don't want my kids working. They need to just go to school and go to high school, go to college, and they don't get introduced into the workforce. And I think that's almost a mistake. Just my opinion. I could be wrong, but I think it's almost a mistake by not giving them that experience of learning what work is like ahead of time. So when they go to, and this paid off well for my kids, because when they got to school, it's like, well, I want to make sure I get a degree because I don't want to wind up doing those type of jobs. I want a degree that is going to pay me well. And so they've all kind of figured out, and I never indoctrinated them to this, I just gave them the experience, but they figured it out on their own that they need to have a skill set that will pay them, right?
Yeah, and so both of our girls were, had jobs through college. In one, it was to teach discipline, how to juggle schedules, and they knew that they knew that their coursework, their academics came first. But at the same time, they had to juggle their academic schedule with their work schedule. So it was teaching them discipline at an early age, right? Because when you get out to the workforce, you got to have that discipline. And I think if you don't have that when you're coming up through school, you kind of get thrown to it. I've seen kids that get into that environment, or younger adults that get in that environment, and they spiral in the opposite direction. They just can't handle it. So it really teaches them discipline. Something else that I really noticed too is the younger generation. This is how they communicate.
Right.
I mean,
I've been battling my kids about this lately. Right.
I mean, this is it. The phone is how they communicate. So with our youngest daughter specifically, and I'm outside of this, just my very own nature, I'm actually very introverted.
Right.
Right. Like if I get into a room of people, unless I have to talk, I'm okay hanging out in the back. I'm good. Right.
Yep.
And our youngest daughter, and that's okay, and our youngest daughter was very much the same way. But so when she was coming up through school, we kind of, and forced is kind of a harsh word, but we forced her to get a job where she had to interact and talk with adults, and she had to be a problem solver. So for quite some time, she was a hostess at a restaurant.
Right.
She was on the front line. So when people came in, she had to handle the reservations, or she had to handle problem conflict. She had to talk with older people, and it really forced her to come out of her shell. And just to see her mature and grow and develop has been amazing. And she did so well through school, and now she's interviewing for her first post-college career. And I have no doubt that she's going to do well, but it's a process. So I too feel sometimes as I'm visiting with moms and dads and they're talking about their kids having a tough time figuring out, quote unquote, who they are and what they want to do, or, well, I really don't want to force them into a situation that they're not comfortable with. I want them to find the perfect job opportunity. And I'm like, just get out there. Where sometimes I'll hear a mom and dad say, well, my son, just as an example, they don't really know what to focus on. They're a gamer.
Right.
They're spending their time playing a lot of games.
Hey, you know what though? There are guys that make a lot of money.
There are, but these are not the gamers that I'm talking about. And so I'm like, well, they can go sit on the curb outside and be a gamer if they want, but they're going to go find work, right? But so we too, my wife and I have been very proactive with getting our girls out there. Because I think if you don't, I think you shield them too much.
No, I agree. There's a lady that lives on my street, and I just love this woman. She's just fantastic.
Yeah.
Because every weekend she has her daughter. Not every weekend, but probably pretty much at least every weekend or every other weekend, her daughters are walking. She has 2 daughters. They're probably 10 and 12, somewhere around there. But they're going up and down the street selling dog treats that they make at home.
Yeah.
But they're having to go door to door, knock on the door. Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Roberts. We made a fresh batch of dog treats. You want some? And I'm a sucker. I buy them every time.
Of course.
Just because I'm so admiring of these 2 girls, and they'll set up they'll set up the lemonade stand on their street, and they're out there every week talking to people, working. And I think her parents are doing a fantastic job, making them do this. And they love the baking of the treats and all those type of things. They're healthy dog treats. They're made out of pumpkin, whatever. But they put them in nice little boxes and they go door to door selling this stuff. And I remember growing up, that was one of the things that probably was one of the best things I did when I was in college. I needed to pay for school. So I went door to door selling aluminum siding. And that is the worst job in the world. If there's a job, the thing about sales is this. And look, I'm in a sales job. That's why you're listening to the show this morning. I don't tell you this, but I would love for you to come be a client of our firm, right? That's the whole reason we do this, the reason we tell you our philosophies, the reason that we spend our time with you every morning to talk about how we manage money, those type of things, is because we're marketing to you. Yes, we would love to have you as a client. We'd love you to be part of our family, that type of things. This is a sales job, and this is marketing. But the secret to this is that every job is a sales job. Every job is a marketing job, because when you go to work for a company, you've got to sell yourself to the company, and you've got to sell yourself. But that experience of going door to door selling aluminum siding, if there is a job that has more no's than yeses in it, it's that one, right? I don't think I ever sold aluminum siding to anybody, but I got doors slammed in my face all the time. But what it teaches you is that rejection is not a bad thing. There's the old saying is that every no leads to a yes, right? Eventually, if you get enough no's, you're eventually going to get a yes. That's not true in aluminum siding, but it does teach you that going out, talking to people, understanding, trying to get to know people, kind of pulling out, what it is that's important to them. And if you can get to that person, to that thing, and the person's like, I've listened to you, I've heard you do this, and this is the way our business works, is that, we have people come in that have been watching our show and listening to or reading our newsletters or whatever for 15 years, 20 years, because we've been doing radio for 25 years. And they'll come in, it's like, oh yeah, I've been listening to you for 20 years and I'm now ready. And it's like, well, what took you 20 years? Like, well, I just retired, I had this event, right? And that's eventually an event's going to occur that gives you a better opportunity. So if you're selling yourself at work and putting yourself out in front of other people, talking to your bosses, talking to your coworkers, those type of things, eventually something will happen at work. It's like, hey, you know what? We really need somebody to handle this. And you'll be the first person they think of. And that's how you get promotions. That's how you get, more advantages at work. If you're just showing up 9 to 5 and going home, yeah, that sucks. And it's also going to suck because, again, you're going to kind of overlook for a lot of other opportunities.
Yeah, and I think everybody's looking for work that's meaningful. Mm-hmm. I think everybody wants to have a sense of purpose, right?
But it's an illusion.
It's an illusion. But the sense
When
of
you're-
purpose?
Early on, it's an illusion, right? I mean, the early on, and my daughter's doing this right
Yeah.
now, right? So my older daughter, she's figuring this out, is that she had this idea that she would leave school and her first job was going to be her dream job.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the illusion. It's not going to be your dream job.
Yeah.
Right? It's your starter job. And it's what's going to give you experience. And it's very interesting because when you go to apply for a company, what's the first thing they ask you? Well, what experience do you have?
Yeah.
I just graduated college. I have no experience.
that's right.
I'm here to get experience. And that's your first job. Your first job is going to be your experience. And that's not going to necessarily be your quote unquote dream job.
Yeah, I do find it rare. So when I'm working with folks that are older than myself, so I'm in that kind of that Gen X category, but it was very common for folks to work for a company for 20, 25, 30 years. And you mentioned, a lot of folks had pensions. Well, that's not the case anymore, right? A pension is, if you can find a pension, get it, right? But now it's, employers have transferred the risk onto employees. That's why now there's this, 401k, 403bs, et cetera. So it's rare now, just when I'm visiting with the younger generation, where somebody's been at one employer for what I would consider a meaningful length of time. Yeah. It's not uncommon for somebody to start with an employer, maybe be there for a year, year and a half, 2 years. Then you kind of notice there's this transition where maybe they're moving to a different employer or looking for another opportunity, right? So and I don't think that they're not loyal. I think they're just maybe wherever they're at, maybe they don't feel like it's meaningful, or they don't have a sense of fulfillment, or maybe they're just looking for opportunities that pay them better income.
Yeah, we've created a lot more job hopping.
Yes.
Especially in the last really kind of 5 years, because of the ability to work remote,
Absolutely.
those type of things, and yeah, we've seen a lot of job hopping that has people jumping jobs to get better pay. But again, then they jump the next job. The problem is there's a drawback to that, which is when employers look at your resume and they saw it's like, John was at this company for a year, and this company for 6 months, and this company for a year, and this company for 8 months. There you go, well, I don't really want to hire John because John's a flight risk. And you have to remember, from an employer standpoint, if I hire John, I'm going to spend a lot of money training him, giving him office space, however he works, whether it's a cubicle or an office or whatever. But I've got to pay for that real estate. I've got to pay for all the equipment that he's going to be using, et cetera. So I've got a lot of cost going into John to hire him as an employee, benefits, health benefits, all those type of things. I've got a lot of costs going into John. If John's only going to be here for a year, because that's what his history says, I'm going to probably bypass John and choose somebody that's been more stable in their work environment, where at least they've been at jobs for 4, 5, 6 years before they jump. Everybody leaves jobs, right? So leaving a job and moving around is not the end of the world. But if you're doing it on a very rapid basis, it's going to blow back on you. Another issue is this one. I got an email from a young gentleman. He's 30 years old. He made a bunch of money in the markets. And he emailed me up and he's like, I'm going to retire. I sent you this email.
Yeah.
And he's like, I want to retire. And this sounds great. Retiring at 30 sounds fantastic. I wish I could have retired at 30. I don't, actually. The problem is twofold. Is that one, you're going to retire and you're going to go out into the world and kind of get away from your job. And we saw a lot of this. There was this whole thing called the Financial Independence Retire Early movement.
Yes.
That occurred. This was back in 2018, 2019, 2020. And so there were all these young people that were saving up $500,000, living very frugally, doing all the right stuff to save money, right? But really focusing on building up this $300,000 to $500,000 worth of finances, and then they would retire and they go get a van and drive around the country, whatever. Well, this was all fine and dandy until we had the market downturn, and that impacted the performance of their portfolio and the value of their portfolio, which now made it non-tenable to have this retire early movement. And so they had to go back to work. And well, the problem with that was they tried to come back to work. And again, you retire early, you're going to get bored, you're going to want to go back to work. Now you've got a skill gap. And the world has been moving past you while you've been in this hiatus, so to speak. And now your skill set is not matched for what the employers want. And then also the employers look at you and go, well, why were you out of the workforce for 5 years, right? So there are consequences to the choices that we make, and so kind of going back to this, kind of the whole conversation this morning, which is, if you're younger and you've got to make some decisions about what you're going to do in your future, and it's very hard, right? And
it is hard.
I will tell you this is that I didn't have it figured out. John didn't have it figured out. Nobody had it figured out when we left college. We were just, one of my professors told me the best thing about college. He said, the only thing you learned in college was how to source information and find answers. That was it. He says, you didn't learn anything else in college, but you did learn how to go get answers to problems. So when there's a problem, you could go figure out how to solve the problem. And that's what you learn in college. Now you have to apply that skill set out in the world. Your first jobs aren't going to be that, but choose your jobs wisely. Gig jobs, kind of one of the jobs now, being a creator, right? I'm going to be an online influencer. Well, this is fantastic, right? You can make a lot of money being an online influencer if you can build a following and sell products and do those type of things. People will pay you a lot of money for that. You run a risk, though. The risk of that is what happens when you lose your popularity, right? Video game streamers run this risk. As you get older, how long can you play a video game and maintain an audience? Even if you're changing video games all the time, how long can you do that? Can you run that business into retirement? If you're 20 or 30 now being a video game, entertainer, this is fantastic. Being a creator is fantastic, but can you run that into your 60s? What's the longevity of that job, and then what are you going to do post that? And this is the case with all jobs, particularly when you're self-employed. You have to think about the longevity of that job, whatever it is. Our job's at risk. So we have a longevity issue with our job because AI is coming along and AI can do our job. Right? Now, can it do its job as well as John? Can AI create the relationships that John has? No, of course not. But it can do financial planning, it can do portfolio management, it can do that. So, there is a risk that in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, the landscape of financial planning and investment management and stock portfolios and those type of things will change dramatically. And the legacy of this business will change entirely in the next decade or two. Don't know what that answer is, but I think you have to look at every job you take saying, what's the longevity of this? And if I'm going to enter this position today, what's my outcome of that longer term?
Yeah, and I think the conversations I'm having with our youngest daughter right now, as she's interviewing with companies, she's looking at a specific job title or role with that corporation. And the particular companies that she is interviewing with, they are very vast in what they do. I mean, I think there's tremendous opportunity just to get your foot in the door and then see where it kind of takes you from there. And I think she kind of gets so focused on, well, this is what I'm interviewing for, and this is kind of, she's kind of trying to identify, and this is what I'm going to be, for the rest of my life. And I'm like, no, you gotta look bigger than that, right? Because there can be just get your foot in the door. There can be some just incredible opportunity from within. So I think, because I remember too, when I was younger, I was trying to have a plan for my life, but I was just happy to have work. When I was coming up through school, I felt very fortunate to have an internship in my junior and senior year in college, and I felt very fortunate that when I was about to graduate that I had received a permanent job offer from the company that I was interning at the time. I felt very blessed. And with our youngest specifically, and I don't mean to pick on her here a little bit at all, we're having great conversations at the house right now about kind of what's next for her. And she's there. The job that she has been in through school, so she's working retail right now. And it's been great for her because, again, it forces her to visit with folks and talk and deal with the public and customers and people that are older than her. She has to, conflict resolution and all of these things, but she'll come home and she's like, oh, it's just, this is what a stressful day and this. And I'm like, you don't know stress yet until you go out and pay rent, mortgage, or you need to put your own food on the table. It's like, don't talk with me about stress just yet. But anyway, there is stress involved. But she's made several comments where, I just wish I could just leave. And I said, you are not leaving this current job that you have, because just take a step back. There are people out there that would bend over backwards to be in the position that you're in, right? So, but you're not going to leave until you have something else lined up, period. There's not going to be a gap there. I don't care. It's not that bad. So just don't make a rash decision on that,
and
right?
but see, I think a lot of that decision making is, we get a lot of this in the media, right?
Yes.
There's a ton of this in the media about, how 9-to-5 work sucks. This is a new environment that we're in today. Gig economy. It's a gig economy. Just kind of do whatever you want. But there's this whole kind of view that is getting put in the media, is that you need to have this kind of work-life balance and these type of things. And that sounds great. Yeah. Having a work-life balance sounds fantastic. I wish I had a work-life balance. I would kill to have work-life balance. But there's a decision you can make, right? And the decision is this: you can have work-life balance, but when you have work-life balance, you're going to cap your pay, right? There is going to be a limit of how much money you can make because of this work-life balance that you've asked for. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as you're okay with that amount of pay, your work-life balance can be really kind of what you want. I can just go to work, do 9 to 5, put in my time, go home, collect my paycheck, go home and do whatever I want to do, right? Relax, find myself, find my inner spirit, whatever. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not bashing that at all. But if you have more aspirations, and this is the thing I talk to my kids a lot, because there's like, when you talk to them, it's like, oh, I want to live here, and I want to travel, and I want to do this, and I want to do this, and here's my hobbies I want to have. Great, wonderful. Wait till you pay for that, right?
Yes.
And it's like, wait till you have kids, and they say, Mom, Dad, take us to Disney World. Well, there's 20 grand out of your pocket, right? So, that ain't cheap. And, having this work-life balance is fantastic until you realize that your work-life balance, how you structure that, is also directly tied to your level of compensation.
It is. It's hard because you're trying to figure this out at a young age. I mean, there are folks my age that are still trying to figure this out, right? And you have to really kind of figure out what's most important to you. There were jobs that I had, careers in the past where I thought of them as jobs. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was a job, I went, I showed up, did my thing, and then I was able to kind of clock out and leave. Over just in reflecting on my own career, it's evolved to now where, this area of expertise that we're in now, I feel very blessed to say I don't view this as work. I don't view this as a job. This is just part of my lifestyle.
Yep.
This is just what I do.
Yep.
And there are many times where the individuals and families that we serve, they'll say, well, John, what are your hours? I'm like, well, yes, they are what they are. We just want to make sure that we're available and here to help take care of people. And I feel very blessed to say that this, to me, doesn't feel like a job. This doesn't feel like work. It's absolutely part of my lifestyle. But this didn't happen right out of the gate with school. It took time to develop for me to kind of find something that I could intertwine with my life. So if you're kind of younger and starting out, just like with our youngest daughter, even with our oldest, who's been in the workforce now after school for a couple of years. Now our oldest is even thinking about the employer that she's with. Is this who she wants to stay with for another 5 or 10 years? So those are conversations that I'm having with her right now, and it just really comes down to what's important and what does she want to do, right?
Well, no, and again, it's, as is always the case, there's a mathematical formula, right?
There is.
Which is that the level of effort is going to equate to your outcome of whatever it is, right? And if you want to be an athlete, the harder you train, the better athlete you're going to be. There's a direct correlation to your effort versus this. And this is why if you ever go pull any job, it doesn't matter what job, you just think of a job, go type into Google, what's the average salary range for whatever job it is. Here's what you'll find, is that it'll show you a range. It'll say, and I just pulled up financial advisor because that's what we do, right? So the average range from 2024 to 2026, the average salary range for a financial advisor goes from $50,000 to $239,000. The median is about $102,000 nationally, right? What separates the difference between the guy making $50,000, the guy making $100,000, and the guy that makes $239,000, right? It's effort. It's showing up to work. It's getting out there and talking to people. It's putting in the time. Answering emails at 9 o'clock at night. Right?
10 o'clock at night.
Yeah. And,
Just saying.
This is true. I mean, when I met my wife, right?
Yeah.
And we had 4 kids. She would take care of the kids while I was working because I was doing, I was working all day in the shop, doing our work. And then I was doing a radio show from 4 to 7, and then I'd have a break from 7 to 8 to shove some food in my face, and then did a national radio show from 8 to 10. So I didn't get home until 10:30 at night.
Yeah.
After being gone from 5 o'clock in the morning. That was my work day. And that was 5 days a week. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, I was writing newsletters, answering emails, doing all that every weekend. But she understood that that was what was required for us to have the lifestyle that we want. Yeah. So that her job was she had to go to work during the day. We had to put our kids in daycare. She had to go to work during the day, but she had to take care of the kids. That was her deal while I did my job.
Yeah.
And that's why it's also very important to have a really good partner when you get married.
Absolutely.
Because if you're working a schedule that if you're trying to work, look, and here's the magic secret. If you're working for yourself, it's an 80-hour gig week, right? You're going to work 80 hours a week if you work for yourself. It sounds great to be self-employed, just realize it's going to take a lot of hours. It's not 9 to 5 to work for yourself. But the point is that whatever you do, choose it where you understand that you're going to have to put in the effort and make sure that you're paid for that effort, right? And that's the most important thing. If your effort leads to higher returns, that's the job you're looking for.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I would agree. And, look, burnout's real. I mean, I know.
I get burned out.
What?
I'm burned out.
You're burned out?
I've been burned out for 40 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could say I've
I wake up burned out. I go to bed burned out.
You wake up, there's like little smolder marks on your pillow, smoke coming out your ears.
Exactly. I'm just going to change my name to Burnout. That's it.
Yeah, right. And the phones, everything, work from home, everything kind of when we went into shutdown mode in 2020, that's really kind of amplified it too, right? I mean, and I get it with Zoom and Teams and instant message. I mean, so it never really turns off, right? But there is, even if you're working 80 hours a week or whatever that is, try to find some time for yourself. I am the worst person to say this because, as my wife would tell you, this is just how I'm wired. I'm a workaholic. That's just how it is.
Right.
But again, it's not work to me. This is truly, like, I view this as part of my lifestyle. But in this, there was data that showed that, like, in 2025, 66% of U.S. workers, and particularly the younger generation, were feeling the effects of burnout.
Yeah.
Right.
And look, just to wrap all this up and bring this back home to investing.
Yeah.
This is why we're so adamant about learning how to save, invest, do these things early in life, so that whatever job you're in, maximize that benefit. Don't spend all the money that you make from that job. Put 20% of that into savings and investments, because what that gives you is you're going to build a career. You're going to be working jobs you hate. You're going to be going to work at times you don't want to work. And it doesn't matter what job it is, whether you're working remote, whether you're working gig jobs, whether you're working, a full-time job somewhere, where you're working multiple part-times, whatever it is. It's all going to suck. Work sucks. I mean, if we have our dithers, I'd much rather be laying on a beach all day drinking Corona, right? That would be great, fantastic. I could do that, not a problem. But we have to work. We need purpose. We need the money. We need these type of things. We need a reason to get up. There's a recent study that showed that all these, we have this kind of rash of baby boomers now retiring.
Yeah.
They're not retiring. They're going back to, they retire for a couple of years and then they go back to work because they need purpose, they need focus, they need to go talk to people and get out into the world. But saving and investing early, putting that 20% of the way, focus on that. Because if you do that early, when you're in your 40s or your 50s, you've got a nice nest egg sitting on your sidelines. You can then make options to say, you know what, I'm going to take a job that doesn't pay me as much, but really is something I would like to do, right? I'm going to go work for a golf shop, right? Because that's what I really want to do. I want to go run a golf club, whatever. Go do something that you really want to do. You can take less pay. It's okay because you've got these assets that are working for you on the side. The problem for most young people is they're not focusing on. They're doing making two big mistakes early. which is one, they're gambling in the markets, which will not work out well. You may make a bunch of money right now because markets are we're in a secular bull market. This will end, and a lot of those investments are going to go away. So learn to invest cautiously and safely, and learn to manage risk in your portfolio so that your assets will grow through cycles over time and you'll survive it, right? The whole goal is to survive the long game. This is why financial planning early is very important, to get your financial plan underway, to understand what you need to do to get to your end goal. The second thing is to focus on building the experience and the areas that will get you to eventually your dream job, whatever it is. You can get to any dream job you want, but figure out what that dream job is and then start working jobs that give you that experience to get to that goal. You can't just go be a news anchor on television, right? You can get there, but you've got to go through the legwork of other jobs to get there first. So again, these are the things that kind of start thinking about, but the advantage of investing and saving early, getting those assets to work for you, get them creating income, buying rental properties, whatever it is, however you want to invest is fine, but make sure that you can maintain that growth over time. You don't have major setbacks of capital through speculation, because again, that will give you flexibility down the road to do whatever it is that you really want to do.
So that's it, right? So a lot of the folks that I work with who are longer in their investment career, and they're wanting to quote unquote retire, to your point, it's rare that I work with somebody who just hangs it up and says I'm done, right? They're not just going to sit on the sofa at home and not do anything. They want to make sure, they want to have the choice to go do something different according to their own schedule. That's it. So if you, like Lance mentioned, if you start at a very young age, start saving and investing early, it'll get you what you're aiming for is to have that choice and that flexibility to do something different on your own terms when the time is right for you. And I think that's what it really comes down to.
Yeah. So bottom line is, yes, work sucks, but we have to make the best of it. And actually work can be very fulfilling. Absolutely. If you just get yourself into the right position. But again, just be careful of headlines. Be careful of kind of the narratives. There's a lot of narratives out there right now about work-life balances, all this. It sounds great in theory. And look, companies have come a long way into trying to provide more work-life balance, providing you the ability to, work at home is shifting into a hybrid type work environment where even like at our company, we want you to be in the office at least 3 days a week, but you can have 2 days where you can work from home, right? So even as our company, we try to build a lot of team and a lot of family around our company. We're small, we're only 30 employees, but we're small enough that we can have flexibility. But we want to help help our employees be efficient, and we want them to be happy when we pay them well. But that's how companies are now approaching. A lot of companies are approaching that way. They're trying to meet employees in the middle. So don't, understand that there's a compromise. You can't have everything you want. Try to find the compromise that gets you to the place that works for you and gives you the best opportunity for your future, and then save and invest.
That's it.
Yeah.
Start early.
Yep.
Yep.
All right, that wraps up the show for the day. Thanks so much for joining us. That's the Real Investment Show. Tomorrow, Q&A with Danny Ratliff. We'll get into markets, your questions, whatever you want to talk about tomorrow with live questions and answers. I said this last Tuesday, and Brent goes, what are we talking about tomorrow? It's Q&A tomorrow on Wednesday. Okay, gotcha. So get by the website, realinvestmentadvice.com. Get our latest blog posts, newsletters, and more. And also like and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate it very much. We'll see you back here tomorrow for the next edition of The Real Investment Show.